why don't we go ahead and start then talking about Vancouver, the team that we were most wrong about, and maybe just bring up some of the reasons maybe why we were wrong.
Yeah, well, obviously, what a difference a year makes for an organization, for starters. I mean, it was drama land, all kinds of turmoil last season in Vancouver with the Boudreau firing and Rick Tocchet coming in and just all the other storylines surrounding the team and just all the turmoil and everything. But look, we saw that when Rick Tocchet took over, down the stretch last year, they were very good. And I think going into this season, we kind of weren't sure. I think we said that they look good enough to be a playoff team. They should be a playoff team. And, clearly we thought that, maybe they'll squeak in a wild card spot or something like that by having them in fifth. But boy, were we ever wrong. 62 points, tied for first with the Winnipeg Jets, by the way. So great to see a couple Canadian teams at the top for once. And they've just had a tremendous season. They've got an elite player at each position, an elite forward in Elias Pettersson, Quinn Hughes, an elite defenseman. He could win the Norris this year, certainly. And Thatcher Demko, a Vezina Trophy caliber netminder. And I think he's kind of the X factor here because he was hurt for a lot of last season. It was a year to forget for Thatcher Demko. And there were a lot of people picking him to, win the Vezina this year. And he is that good. I watched him against my Sabres on the weekend there. And if it weren't for Thatcher Demko, we probably would have won that game. And the other thing is, they're getting contributions from everybody in that lineup. Look at the year that Brock Besser is having. A guy like Andrei Kuzmenko has had a lot of ups and downs, has been battling with Tocchet and now the lineup, but he's been playing better. A guy like Connor Garland has been playing better. Dakota Joshua, look at the year that he's having as a depth forward. Got to mention Philip Hronek as well. Mm-hmm. I mean, he has been fantastic. It kind of reminds me, this year, Hughes and Hronek, it kind of reminds me of like McAvoy Lindholm last year in Boston, how you could make an argument for both of those guys that they deserve Norris Trophy consideration. So it's just been a tremendous run for the Vancouver Canucks for so many years now. We've been talking about this team as on paper with the guys that they have, that young core, they should be a contender. And it was looking like for a while there that they wasted this core. Well, finally, it took a while, but finally, they've been able to be this good. I forgot to mention JT Miller as well. He's been absolutely unreal. So 7-2-1 their last 10, tied for first overall. And I see the Canucks as a Stanley Cup contender as they're currently constituted. Your thoughts on Vancouver?
That is just crazy to hear that we're thinking of the Canucks. And I'm in agreement here. I think they are legitimately a possible Stanley Cup contender. Like, they look that good. And it's crazy that we're saying that because they've been such a weirdly below average team for the last, 5 years or so since this whole core has been around. We've been looking at this team on paper and saying it should be better. And they would have players who have great individual seasons, but they weren't able to string together, consecutive wins. And under Tocchet, that's almost exclusively what they've done. They've been on a heater since he took over as head coach last season. And, they're just showing that they deserve to be considered, one of the best teams in the league. You mentioned they have a stud or two at every single position. I think that's so key. And Demko has played out of his mind this year, which has been incredible. Last year, we had some injuries. And when he was in the net, he wasn't exactly that good until down the stretch. So, it's nice to see that their goalie, who looks like a Vezina candidate right now, is playing well. The one thing I'll say about Vancouver, actually, before I get into this, Case is not on this episode, and next week I just want to put this out here because he's going to try it next week. And if he's listening to this, then I hope it gets a smile and a chuckle and brought up next week. But he's going to try to tell you, I told you so, about the Vancouver Canucks. But let me be very clear here. He had the Canucks in the 4th spot in his predictions, and you and I both had them in number 5. So even Casey, who was higher on the Canucks than we were, did not predict them being this good this season. So I just want to put that out there if Case is listening to this. Don't try it next week. All right.
Yeah.
But the one thing I did want to get into with Vancouver is they are the team right now who is scoring the most above expected in the entire NHL. What that usually means is that regression is coming. The thing is, we've been saying this for the past month. All of the people interested in advanced analytics have been keeping track of this. They're scoring way more than expected, and they're getting a ton more saves than expected, which, you can attribute that to luck, or you can attribute that to having really good finishers and a really good goaltender. So you can kind of make up your mind as to, what you think that is for the Vancouver Canucks. But I just wanted to put that out there. In terms of expected goals for and against, for both of those numbers, they're still in the top 10 in the entire NHL in all situations. So I think that might be carried a little bit by their special teams. I know their power play has a bunch of weapons on it, and it's pretty good. But even though they're scoring above expected and getting more saves above expected than a lot of teams in the league, their underlying numbers aren't that bad. Like, they're pretty good. They're top 3rd in the NHL. All that to say, I don't know if they're the number 1 best team in the league, in terms of points by the end of the season. I'm not going to predict a President's Trophy win here, but I will say they are comfortably a playoff team. And like we both said, I think they have a legit chance to compete for the Stanley Cup, which is crazy because we picked them to finish 5th at the start of the season.
Yeah, exactly. And, the Canucks and the Canadiens, the last 2 Canadian teams to make it to a Stanley Cup final. Obviously, the Canadiens, has a bit of an asterisk attached to it because, COVID and everything. And
don't tell Habs fans that.
Yeah, exactly. Geez, I might get in a lot of trouble for saying that. But and then of course he had Vancouver losing to Boston in 2011. So but I'm with you, man. And looking at the numbers and the analytics and everything, yeah, like they're shooting the lights out. A lot of guys are having career years. Regression is coming next year for these guys. Like, Brock Besser is having just an insane season. For example, Philip Hronek is in a contract year, and the list goes on. But it's all the more reason for this organization to take advantage of a year like this. By the way, Elias Pettersson needs a new contract after this year. Take advantage of this year and go for it. I think you have to. I look at the Panthers last season. They got in by the skin of their teeth. An elite player in Matthew Tkachuk, a couple of elite defensemen, and a goaltender who got really hot in Sergei Bobrovsky. Vancouver has all of those elements to be able to go on a run to the Stanley Cup Finals. And the other thing, and Emerson, I got to give him credit for this. He brought it up the other night. Man, this... As tough as it was to make this decision, they made the right one, moving on from Bo Horvat and committing to JT Miller, because he is an absolute prick on the ice, and he is an elite player in the NHL. Yeah,
man, like absolute fantasy workhorse. The guy does everything on the ice, plays in all situations. He's a guy who, in the past, there were plenty of concerns, and rightfully so, defensively in his game. That's something that he's worked on. And, not to mention that he's on pace for whatever it is, 110 plus points. So, he's had a great season again. And you're right, man. Maybe they, did pick the right guy, even though at the time we weren't exactly sure. But going back to Pettersson, man, like, his next deal, I know he's an RFA, so he's not going to get maybe as much as a UFA could command, but my God, it's got to be between 12 and 13. No, it's got to start with at least a 12.
I think, and again, my brother and I have talked about this a little bit. I think potentially we could see him become the next highest paid player in the league on his next deal.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends how long he signs for it too, because that impacts the dollar. But
if it's an 8-year deal, like if it's max term, I could see him becoming the next highest paid player in the NHL. I really could see that.
Yeah, which, by the way, I don't think it will be 8 years because there's been so much, turmoil between the two sides. I feel like I don't, and this is just kind of speculating, but I feel like Pettersson would be a guy to sign, a 12 and a half times 4 years or something, and then when the cap goes up again, then he cashes in for 16 by 8 or whatever it is at that point. So because we've kind of mentioned, Vancouver's having a great season, but there's been a lot of uncertainty in years past. And, in the future, there's also a bit of uncertainty too. So you never know if he wants to commit for that long. But I think that's enough about Vancouver